Welcome to the Pathways to Success. I'm Julian Placino, recruiting professional turned success speaker, show host, and media entrepreneur. This show is dedicated to helping you find your unique pathway to success by having conversations that educate, inspire, and transform. Together, we'll interview some of the world's greatest leaders and uncover their secrets to success. Thanks for tuning in, and on to the show. Welcome to episode 219 of the Pathways to Success, where we have conversations with inspiring leaders about their journey and their keys to success. I'm Julian Placino, your host, and we have a tremendous show in store for you today. It is my pleasure to welcome President and CEO of Eastman Beaudine, and of course the author of The Power of Who in Two Chairs, Bob Beaudine. Bob, welcome to the Pathways to Success. How are you, sir?
Julian, so great to be with you. I've been looking forward to this.
You know, I have also, and I have read The Power of Who cover to cover, and have listened to the audiobook of Two Chairs all the way through. And although a lot of times I don't remember every single concept, I remember the key themes. And I say this with zero exaggeration or hyperbole. I believe if the world really understands the grasps of these two key messages from the book, I really think it could change the world. So I'm honored that you're here.
Thank you. I think they were way ahead of their time.
Yeah.
But it's timely now.
And I'm absolutely excited to jump right in.
Thanks.
So I want to start with the book, The Power of Who. So what first inspired you to write this book?
So if I look back, I had a mom and dad that were fantastic, who flat out loved you, hugged you, kissed you, supported you, mentored you, picked you up, always did that. And I thought, actually growing up, that was the norm. And then as I grew up, I found that it wasn't. And so I quickly felt that I write books now to remind people and teach people the whole concept of who they are and whose they are and the path they're called, and to kind of try to get them to understand that they do one thing better than anyone else in the world, and encourage and inspire them.
So when you wrote this book, who did you have in mind? Was there a specific audience? Like, who is this book for?
Yeah, so 69% of the country today believe that a bad day at the beach is better than a good day at work. So we have trouble. 80% of the country are not using their number one talent. So that means we're spending billions of dollars training people in jobs they don't want to do. 60% of the country is getting divorced. People are coming home on trains and planes and automobiles, and they're frustrated that they're just doing something that they weren't called to do. The greatest people have found some secret that they had this pre-wired internal radar homing signal that was leading them towards doing something that they love, with people they love, in a place they love, where their family loves it, and they get to do it for all the right reasons. And they sure as heck didn't go out and send a resume in to "Dear Sir, to whom it may concern, dear recruiter." They didn't go do cold calls and mass emails and send out, and try to create elevator speeches. They had within them this whole thought. So there is a whole group of people. I mean, just giving the commencement address that I did for a university this past week, everyone wants to do something they were called to do, not just, have to do. Whatever you're doing today is doing you. And I don't know about you, but that's a threat for people. And so we're seeing people all over the country with the dissatisfaction at such a high rate. And they just feel this, hey, I'm not being celebrated, I'm being tolerated. And so I wrote this for everyone across the board to get them to understand that there's a specific path. And so I wrote a book specifically to give a definitive plan, a definitive strategy for personal, transformation.
So let's jump straight into that. And you said something that's near and dear to my heart. It's the concept of doing work that you love. And I thought it was really interesting when I met you that you and I share a background in recruiting.
Right.
Well, having been in the industry for 16 years, I was privy to a truth that there are so many people out there who are unhappy with what they're doing,
Right.
and wish they could do something that they love.
Right.
So how does someone find that? And especially someone early in their career, that's why I wanted my nephew and my nephews and my niece to be here and to really help them build their career in alignment with what I feel God calls them to do. So where do you start with that?
So when they're young at this age, I get them to, I go buy 20 magazines with the coolest pictures that you could possibly do. I just hand them all to them and I say, cut out everything that inspires you, that makes you feel like, oh my gosh, this would just catch my attention. It could be a scene, it could be a picture, it could be all of a sudden, a place, it could be all of a sudden something that you're doing that so excites you. And if I get them then to put that up on a whiteboard and you and I look at it, all of a sudden we see something. When I grew up, I loved Sherlock Holmes. And so the reason I loved it is he had this uncanny ability of seeing what everybody else couldn't see that was hidden in plain sight. And so, I live by a quote by a guy named G.K. Chesterton that says, the one thing in life that gives radiance above other things is there's something great just around the corner. Are you looking for it? So the first facet is that we have to bring it to the attention that they're not in any which way in comparison to anyone else, that they do one thing better than anybody else in the whole world. And we have to remind them of that. And when they can see that for the first time, that all of a sudden they do that, then they stop all this other aspects of other people and start to get in and say to myself, what's written on my heart? So I had this girl. And so I make a speech at Cal Riverside. And so I finish my talk and I say, if you want me to talk about your dream, at the end, I'll sign your book and I will take 1.5 to 2 minutes with each person, and I guarantee you I can change the whole trajectory of your dream in our 1.5 to 2 minutes. And so everyone finished, they all applaud, and over comes the athletic director to me and he says, I don't want to, it's 7 o'clock at night, they've been working out, they've been doing this, they just might, not do that, so don't feel bad if they don't get in line. All 400 student athletes get in line. And the first one comes up to me, Mary, and she goes, oh my gosh. I said, hey, so Mary, what's the dream? And so she goes, I don't know, Mr. Beaudine. And I said, sure you do. It's like written on your heart. And she goes, I don't know. And I said, well, there's 399 people behind you. And I'm going to wait until you tell me. And then, bam, she blurted it out. Isn't that interesting that it's already written on it, that God has already told you specifically that this is on your heart? You know that. You just haven't felt comfortable telling people around you what it is. So I spend 1.5 minutes with her. We talk about her dream. She goes home. Then she sends me a note on Facebook the next day. I got to tell you my who story. Really? And so she goes, gets me on the phone. She goes, did I tell you that I was embarrassed that my mom plays bridge? Like the card game? And she goes, yeah. And she goes, I go, why? And she goes, get a job, Mom, and do something. And so she said, I get into Chicago. She lived in a really nice area in Chicago. And she said, I wake up the next day at 11:30 because I've been a soccer player and I've never had a chance to sleep. And so she said, I start to walk down and guess what? My mom's playing bridge in the living room. Wow. And so she going by, she doesn't want to do it. All of a sudden she looks in there and all of a sudden Mrs. Robinson looks at Mary and says, hey, Mary, come in here. What are you doing? She goes, oh, I'm just going to get some cereal. She says, no, come in here. And so she comes in and she goes, what are you going to do now that you graduated? She goes, oh, I don't know, Mrs. Robinson. And Mrs. Robinson says, sure you do. It's written on your heart. And she goes, do you know Mr. Beaudine? No. And she goes, what do you want to do? And she says, okay, I'm going to tell you what he said. That if we would share our dream that's written on our heart with the people who love us, there's something that happens that has always meant to happen. And so she says, I want to be in pharmaceutical sales. So she tells her little story and immediately, and so her mom says, you never said you wanted to do that. And well, her uncle was doing it, she's doing it. Mr. Beaudine gave me a couple names. And then Mrs. Robinson says this, I don't think you've met my bridge partner, Eleanor. And she goes, Eleanor, why don't you tell Mary what your husband does? Well, he's the president and CEO of Abbott Labs, the largest pharmaceutical. And in one swoop, the next day she has an interview, the next day she's hired, and then she all of a sudden can now shadow. Is it possible that we hinder ourselves because of three things. You don't get your dream because of three specific things. You don't ask, you ask the wrong people, you're wrong who, I call it, and you're vague. So it's the old Jerry Maguire, help me help you. How would I help you if you didn't tell me what it is you want? And since you don't see your friends and your family as resources and conduits to your dream, you're immediately left with what? Strangers.
Yeah. So a few key things I got there. You mentioned sharing your dream with the people that you love.
Right. Out loud.
Out loud.
And so what happens is we don't do that because my dad's a dentist, my mom's a nurse, and I want to be an artist. I never forget my daughter saying to me one time, oh my gosh, Dad, I want to go to the underground and watch this great new talents in New York, and a person I really want to see, Sarah Bareilles, is going to be there. She's brand new, no one knows who she is, and she's this act. And I said, hey, I can get, let me see what I can do. And she goes, oh no, Dad, come on, now that's like in sports, you do. And so this is another category. So what people do is you see me just one-dimensionally. But I'm who-dimensional. I have friends. If you have 100 friends and I have 100 friends, we don't have 200 friends, we have 10,000 friends, right? And so the issue was, immediately I make 2 calls to my friends. We're in line, she doesn't know anything, Rachel doesn't. And then immediately there's a bullhorn that comes out and goes, Rachel Beaudine, are you here? And so she goes, yes, hey, oh my gosh. And she comes out and he's, bring who's ever with you. And so Cheryl and me come over and da-da-da, and he goes, hey, you have VIP pass, you get to meet Sarah Bareilles, you get to do all this stuff. And she goes, oh my gosh, how so? And she goes, you got who? Your dad. It was one of the great moments because we never see our friends and our family as a resource and conduit to our dream. Now, that's what's hindered us. We're so backwards. We're still trying to do things ourselves, like our own way. Like, hey, my dad, we've been taught, my dad walked to school 20 miles up a thing, and then, he worked his way, and he never asked for anybody's help, and he did it his own way. Listen, if I make an introduction to you, how is that possibly? I can't do your job. I'm introducing you. This is the gift of gifts. And see, what God has given us is specific people to help us. And once we start to see it, of course, again, it's a seeing thing, everything changes.
So I want to further unpack that concept right there. So you said that you already know everyone you need to know.
Right.
And I think some people are thinking like, that's totally crazy.
Right.
What does that mean?
So before people balk at the idea of you already know everyone you need to know, first off, it's the most freeing concept that you have. So whatever it is that you're trying to do, whatever you're trying to meet, you're going to do a deal, you're going to try to get a job, you kind of think, the very first thing you think to yourself is, I already know everyone. It's not like 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. We're one. You know one person who knows another person who do it, but you won't know it because you don't like to ask, you ask the wrong who, and you're vague. So we never specific about what it is we want. And so that's the way current networking is done. Hey, I'm doing a job here for this company in finance. What do you think? You say, hey, let me think about it. I'll call you back. And of course, you're not calling back. But if I said I had 7 people that I wanted to run by you, you're going to go, because you're my friend, oh yeah, sure. And you go through 1 and you say, I don't know that, 2, 3, 4. By the time you're starting to get down, and you knew a couple, but by the time you get to number 7, you think, I got to get Bob off the phone. And I'm banking on that because you're my friend, and I wanted to slow your mind down to give me the one name you had, which you would have, but you were too busy to be able to think about it. So listen, one of our problems is that when God has provided people, it's just so crazy. We get a glimpse of it every day. Every once in a while, maybe every other day, you're going through something and you're on a street, you're going something, and someone falls. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this fantastic person comes in and picks the person up, gets all their materials, somehow helps them, and you wish you had it on your iPhone to be able to show it so I could take it back and show my grandkids. This is what life's supposed to be about. And then you think about it, and you say, oh my gosh, no one else even saw this. What if there are particular people that are coming across your path, even as we speak, to help you find your dream? See, because not only is anyone who's at an age can tell you about the person who helped them and gave them the loan, the opportunity, the pickup, the one thing they needed at one time in their life. They remember the time, the date, the person. You remember it. Everyone remembers that one person. And yet, we just don't think that can happen twice or three times or four times. And so what happens is once you start to get into the power of who, and you start to realize that your friends want to help you. And so here's the thought. So I tell people that they got who. They have a community of friends that they have personally developed through love and unconditional giving that'll come to their aid if they ask them. So even though, one of your nephews or one of your situations is young, they have no who supposedly, but they have friends who have parents. They have their uncles and their dad and their moms, and they have friends. But unless they tell them what it is specifically they want, they won't. Now, my daughters right now at Christmas time, they don't ask me and say, hey, I'm thinking about something. They show me printed out Amazon exactly the gift that they'd want.
Specific, right? Yeah.
And that's the way we work. But if we would be more specific, that's the way God likes. He wants you to ask him specifically about what it is you want and then how we're going to get there. So if we're thinking about a new company, we already know all the people we need to know right now. It's already done. And so the Kaizen concept of Japanese looks backward in business is so fantastic here. When I do a search for a head coach or something, the very first question I say is, when do we want the news conference? And then I go out to all my friends. I identify the research because it's all online of who are the people that we possibly could have. And then I go to my friends and say, do you know this person? And then they say, you don't need to know this person. The one you need to know is this person. And then we do it. Gotcha. And now we move this level. So if you needed to be pretty much meet anyone, I mean, I've now interviewed presidents of the United States and generals and studio heads and everyone. And the top 1% of the country does something different than everyone else. What do? They do everything with their friends and family. And you know what they told everyone else to do? Get in line and online. Big mistake. Don't do that. Stick with the people you were given. You weren't given these people by chance, which is the thought of thoughts, right?
So tell us about how to make that even more actionable. You talk about something called the 140 strategy.
Right.
What does that mean?
So in your life, I created a strategy that had two compartments, two aspects that you could look at and touch and feel, and you could make lists on, okay? Lists are so important. You can't go to the grocery store without a list. You can't, God created the 10 commandments on a list. If we do a strategy session, we create this whole aspect of statistical aspects on a strategy. The 100 are the people in your who, the people who matter most. So most people, they say they have lots of friends, and I would have called my book The Power of Friendship, but they got 5,000 people on Facebook are their best friends. And so it's disingenuous. What are the people who actually are going to help you in your time of need? I mean, if you have an accident in a car, you're not calling someone you just met at a conference with their business card. You're calling someone who matters. And that's why when I do a text message game, I do it with people who matter. And so the 100 are your who. And maybe at a young age, you have 8, 20, okay, through all your cousins and all the people when you start to do it. And if you have someone like me who can sit and talk you through exactly who you who are and who are not, all of a sudden we start to go deeper with them in their friendships. The 40 are what is it that you want? Let's tell you to do it. So let's just say I want to all of a sudden be a Instagram influencer. And so how would I go about being an Instagram influencer? And so you'd say, oh my gosh, Bob's daughter's an Instagram influencer, and then because you're my friend, I'm introducing you to my daughter, who's then opening up 50 Instagram influencers who are all her friends, and they're all of a sudden showing you the keys to be able to do it, and then they're showing you how to post, what you should do, how you do lighting, how you do it, and you start to grow. You don't have to be great to start. That's what Ziegler said. You got to start to be great. So there's a starting point. It's the same way with friendships. Hello. We meet, we talk, but people have stopped doing all this stuff. We don't help our friends. We don't meet in little who groups. So if I connect the dots of what I want and I now send it out. So for example, I finished my first book. I had no idea who to pick as an agent. I don't know anything about this field. I never wrote a book. I can't even write a memo. So I was just like thinking, how would I do this? So I go over to Barnes & Noble and I start looking through all the inspirational, books that are possibly out. And I look and there's this person named Jan Miller. And everyone seemed to have this person. So I immediately send out to 20 of my who, I'm doing this book. I've written this book. I'm trying to pick an agent. I don't know anybody, but there's one person keeps coming. Does anybody happen to know Jan Miller? 4 of my people come back immediately.
Know who Jan Miller is.
They know Jan Miller. I immediately send the 4 and say, who knows her the best? 1 does. Then I talk to my person, Keenan Delaney. What does he say? He says, oh my gosh, Bob, I lived with her and her husband when I graduated from Ohio State. Come on, you did not. Can God actually create all this stuff for you in advance? That it's all been pre-planned and pre-wired? Does he know? Yes. And so the hard part of this is that you can never get what you can't see. So where's your whiteboard? What is it you want? Where's your 100? Where's your 40? Who are you going to call? Have you sent something out to your friends? Let's start. All we have to do is start. That's the greatest part of this whole thing. And so the issue is that people put up on their list, and I hear this all the time, oh, well, I asked this person and they never helped me. It wasn't your who. You just went off to an influencer. People who influence. That's the whole reason I wrote in one of the stories of George Bailey in It's a Wonderful Life is when he really was pressed. It's the most inspirational movie in life. He was pressed. He goes to the evil Mr. Potter. And then when he doesn't help him, he's obviously going to go back to his friends. No, he goes to the bridge to jump off. And listen, we got people jumping off bridges today.
Yeah.
And so, but when he finally does it and he comes back, they all cheer him when he gets all the money back and all the things that he needed. To George Bailey, the richest man in town, what was he rich with? Friends.
Yeah.
Friends is the key here. See, the issue is that there's a new Harvard study. And Harvard just did a study, 80-year study, on the benefits of relationship. How relationship, if you're satisfied in your life at 50, you're healthy at 80. If you have a great marriage, you have less chance of having a mental disorder, having any problems of physical disorders. Friends have always been the key. Who's the one friend? The most important aspect for kids today is to have one true friend, and that you can share with, that you go deeper with, that's a secret keeper. See, friends help you now. Acquaintances, they wish you well. Friends know the song in your heart, and they can sing it back to you when you've forgotten the words. Friends are just amazing.
I believe it, and honestly, I think just the manifestation of this interview that I'm having with you is a result of the power of who. You are a tough person to get a hold of, and it's hard to get access to you, but it's because of our mutual friend Larry North, who has been on the show and has become my friend.
Right.
The trust that he and I had transferred to you.
Right.
And that's how we had this conversation, so I absolutely believe in it.
And everyone has that one friend that if they're supposed to meet, that opens that door.
Yeah.
And they do it easy.
So before we move on to Two Chairs, what's the final key takeaway that you want our audience to know? Are everyone tuning into the live stream about the power of who? What's that one thing?
So what if each of us were given specific people to help us in ways we never imagined? And what if those people aren't happenstance acquaintances? What if they were strategically given you to help you find that place in life you always dreamed about? What if helping our mom get in a hospital, finding a new job, finding our direction on being able to get the one big deal loan that I want isn't about who you don't know, but whom you're neglecting, your friends. So the issue is that, listen, people matter most. Our heart knows it, God taught us, and we've forgotten. And so one of the things that I'm constantly trying to remind people is that you got to reach out. You got to reconnect with your friends. You know, there's people that you haven't talked to in a while, and you think to yourself, because you have this voice in your head that says, hey, I can't call them, I haven't done this, I haven't kept up. But once someone's taken a place in your heart, they never leave. And the first thing they go is, oh my gosh, Julian, I can't believe you just called. It's so great to hear from you. Oh my gosh, how can I love you, how can I help you? And see, that's what friends do. And see, they don't remember all this stuff. And so what's hindering us is this kind of fake space that happens. And so the Power of Who is a catalyst for greatness. Viktor Frankl once said that between a stimulus and a response, and Viktor Frankl's the guy who wrote In Man's Search of Meaning, and was in the Nazi death camp. Between a stimulus and a response is space. It's the space to choose, okay, how you're going to respond. And that response that you're about to give, okay, to someone in a time of need, that response that all of a sudden you don't have time to help them, that response that all of a sudden says you're going to smile at them and just hand and give somebody something that they need at the moment, is where all growth and freedom is.
I love that. So Bob, I want to close with two chairs, and I shared with you when you and I first met why this book was special to me. It's because my friend Don Glacy, who's a great mentor of mine, he called me up one day and he says, Julian, you have to check out this book, Two Chairs, because based on it, you very well could have written your own version of this. And essentially, you know, the claim is that throughout time you have been having conversations with God and using these conversations to guide you in your path.
Right.
Well, without even knowing you existed, I have actually been practicing this for the past 2 years.
So fantastic.
So then I needed to meet you. Someone else has had this experience and wrote about it, and that's why I needed to meet you. So how would you describe to our audience, to everyone here tuning into the live stream, how would you describe what Two Chairs is?
So when I was first starting and trying to figure out my goals and my dreams, how I'd find a mate, how I'd do trouble, you know, I could have gone to my dad, who was a McKinsey, the whole side, but my mom was kind of my spiritual go-to. So I had written The Power of Who through the lens of my dad. I wrote Two Chairs through the lens of my mom. And so I went to my mom and I said, how am I going to find this? And I was a senior in college. She goes, oh, those are really good questions. She goes, I don't have the answer, but I know who does. And so she said, I'm going to ask you 3 questions. And these 3 questions are simple and yet disruptive. And so she says, are you ready? And I said, sure. And so when people come to my office and they really are in trouble, because there's times in life where we come to a realization that there's a limit to what we can do on our own. And there's comes a time where there's so much trouble, and I don't want to talk about Power of Who. I want to talk about these 3 questions. So I always say to them, let me ask you these 3 questions. You can't get mad at me. You're going to have to get mad at my mom. And it's very disarming to them. And so I said to them, I said, so here's question number 1. And my mom asked me, she says, does God know your situation? Now this is fascinating. When you're in a situation, would it be logical that you'd want to talk to the guy who created the whole world and he's sitting across from you and you could say it? The answer is yes, I think he knows. And he says, not only does he know, but he wants you to know he knows. And see, in the highest priority in a time of crisis to get your mind above it, and the highest thought, of course, is God. And what we think is God only has like 6 telephones, like he's an old-time telephone operator. Like he only has 6 telephone lines for like 7.5 billion or 8 billion people now. And so the answer is he doesn't. And he only works on like, you know, ISIS and heart attacks and natural disasters and all these other stuff. No. He knows everything about you. You can be in every room. So 2 is this too hard? And so for him to help you. Now this is interesting. I had this conversation today with someone because they're overwhelmed with some trouble. And so, and the answer is, hey, is it too hard? No, it's not, but it's too hard for them. So the question was, does he have a good plan for you? Yes. I said, so what is it? And he says, I have no idea. Exactly. 2 chairs. So what if we set up 1 chair for God, 1 for us, and we meet and we do an 80-20 rule. You get to talk, okay, and you get to talk for 1 minute, and you make the exchange. Because one of the problems is that the reason I can't see other people is that I'm holding on to my cares. And that's what we've been doing. Our vehicle before that we've done with God is that we do call prayer. And I love people. I hope they pray more. But the issue is that you can't give something to God and then take it back. And then you're holding on to it because then you're God over those problems. And so the problem of that is that we have to get over that. So we make the exchange. We give him all the trouble. God usually asks me, and he says, so listen, can you go 1 day and be cheerful? And I go, I'm going to work on that. Okay. And he goes, okay. So we make the exchange and he does an exchange. Now, how do I explain the inexplainable to people? The indescribable, the impossible. Listen, in the presence of God is fullness of joy, and of course the joy of the Lord is your strength. And so if you have like a Moses burning bush situation and you're in trouble and you need something and your friends aren't sticking up for you and no one else, and you've lost your job and your wife has just passed away and someone over here has had a situation, I want to sit with God and say, hey, do you know about this? And what do I do? And he gives you peace and joy and insight and wisdom and power and favor. And so it's unbelievable. And then he goes, okay, so listen, I got some things for you. So there's some things that we're supposed to do. He has created works for us in our day that once we do those works, because he always asks me, I got some things, are you available? And I go, yes. And so he goes, they're going to be inconvenient. And I said, no, I'm in. If we do those things of his, is it possible that the guy who created the whole world is going to take care of your troubles too? And he does. So there's a switch here. So in The Power of Who, I'm talking about a whole scene of people that you haven't seen because you never saw your friends and your family as resources and conduits to your dream. And so as a result, you've been sticking with a bunch of people who are not your friends, and you're in line and you're online and you're busting and you're doing a job that's totally waxing you and lowering your energy, instead of doing a job you love with people you love in a place you love where your family loves you, get to do all the reasons. When you're sitting with God, he now tells you what's written on your heart. So like, he's got a plan. It's good, it's prosperous. So every day we sit and listen to the enemy talk to us and tell us all the negative things, and we're totally okay with that, which is radical. And then if God talks to us one time, okay, all of a sudden that's schizophrenic. No, that would be an enemy tactic. And so the issue is that I have people, they say to me, I really don't believe. And then when they meet, they feel him the first time they enter the room. And so my only thing is, if there's a 1% chance that God himself would meet you tomorrow at 2 chairs, would you go? That's the challenge. This is the 2-chair challenge. Mm-hmm. And I can promise you all my success in business and life comes from 2 chairs. I've been having the same meeting every day, from mentoring, advice, and daily guidance. That's better than any aspect of anything I've ever. There's no conferences, there's no nothing, there's everything. It doesn't even get a thing when you're sitting with the person who created the world. And so when you want to do something that is wild, that's so big, that's where God is. There's no guardrails, there's no ceiling. You were created to do great and mighty things. I mean, so the greatest thing I want to finish on this thing is that's so good is that the Jewish faith has this fantastic thing they do with their kids. And it's my number one thing to tell parents to do with their kids. They lay hands on their kids at night and they tell them, I love you, I'm proud of you, and I give you the Father's blessing. And as they walk out of the room, they tell them they're going to do great and mighty things. And so this Father's blessing is a big deal. It allows kids to move into their calling. 70% of men have never told their kids they love them. 70 in the country. It doesn't mean that they didn't love them. It means that their dad didn't tell them and done this. And we can change that right now and stop the curse. And so I do it with my grandkids. I do it with my daughters. I mean, I constantly send notes to my girls. Did I tell you today that I love you? And so, everyone has different love languages. My oldest says, oh my gosh, I love you too, Daddy. Next one says, you just did. My last one says, no, you didn't call me. And so it's all fun. And so is it possible, like you started, that there's 2 books that actually get you right on to where you were path and what you were meant and created to be? That you do one thing better than anyone in the world. No one can do it. The world is short unless we do it. And so my job as your friend is to nourish and encourage and lift that up and get you on that path. To never allow you to be overwhelmed, to be at that dark place for you when that comes. And if we will do that as friends, if we will start getting back to friendship, meeting in face to face and doing all the things again where we just sit and have coffee and say, are you okay? Then we can all of a sudden do some great things.
I love that.
Yeah.
Bob, we talked a lot about a lot of different ideas from the Power of Who, from Two Chairs. If you would, close us out. The show is called Pathways to Success. It's about helping people achieve their best success in life and business. But if you would, give my nephews and my niece final piece of advice here to succeed in their career as they continue school and get jobs or start businesses. What's the best advice that you could give them?
Number one advice, have a mentor. Number one, have somebody you trust, someone who's going to nourish you. No one can get in anywhere and accelerate in throughout an organization without a primary source of favor. You have to have someone who loves you and is looking past all the stuff, sees all how hard it's going to be. So having a mentor means that you are all in on serving and loving and caring and doing whatever it takes and listening. Listening today equals love. So one of the things that I try to do with young people is to remind them, don't be worried about titles. If you're going to think like, hey, I got to get a title, I got to have this or that, I don't know, I'm going to give you a title that's the greatest title that you could ever have. And then when you have this title and you tell people this is what you do, this is my title, everyone's going to look to you to try to promote you, to help you, to come ask your thoughts about what it is I could do. So what is that title? You're the director of love. And I tell one of the things, that's your title. And so I'm just not confined by a head of operations. I'm this person. I'm currently moving up. I'm student. I'm this. No. For your friends, if they could come to you because you don't need anything, because you've sat with the king at Two Chairs. So, my number one advice is run to Two Chairs now. Talk to God. He's going to talk to you. Have a journal. Listen to him. And then, have in the Power of Who, the mentor you're supposed to do, and never go to a company where you don't have that, ever. You have to have a primary source of favor.
I love it.
Yeah.
Bob, this has been an absolute pleasure. If you would, please tell our audience how to follow you, how to check out your books. You can go straight into this camera right here. Thank you.
So, thank you. So, BobBeaudine.com is that. I'm on all of the social media. And when people want to, they get some idea, message me. Tell me something. I respond to people. People can't think of it. They're wondering who puts your posts up. When I do posts in the morning, it's at Two Chairs. I'm sitting there, and then all of a sudden I get some inspiration and I put it up. And so do that. And then the books, they're all on like Amazon. It's hard to imagine how good God's been on this, is that both of these are now global bestsellers. And someone just bought 265,000 copies of Two Chairs. Wow. To go to prisons, military, first responders, and social services. So get on any of the social media. I'd love to talk to you and encourage you and inspire you. And I have several books coming.
Awesome. And we can't wait for that. And we'll make sure to have all of your contact information and everything in the show notes. Bob, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for being here.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Bob. It's been great. And everyone else, thank you all for tuning in to another episode of the Pathways to Success. As always, make sure to subscribe, comment, and share. And we'll see you next time on the next episode of the Pathways to Success.